Welcome to Gold and Blue, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to sing gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. Hey, you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Gold and Blue. So get your team represented here on Gold and Blue. Welcome to another edition of As the Pac-12 Turns. And the most recent development is that tweet by Mike Harlan, the Utah athletic director, saying, "Give me a break," in response to Dennis Dodd's tweet of Big 12 readies to pounce on the four corner schools as doubt creeps in about the Pac-12's viability. Then, of course, Greg Hansen said, "The only true and reliable source yet to surface on the Pac-12's future, Utah athletic director Mark Harlan needs just 4 words to disarm the Arizona to the Big 12 narrative." And I've talked to that at length. And my reasoning was maybe he's just providing plausible deniability because it happens all the time. But now I'm hearing another reason that he might have said that is because Utah really isn't going to the Big 12. They could actually be going to the Big 10 with Washington, possibly Oregon, and possibly Stanford. But Washington and Utah being rumored to go to the Big 10. This would be catastrophic news for Oregon. Oregon does not want to go to the Big 12, but they might have to go to the Big 12 if the Big 10 chooses Washington and Utah. But if they choose all 4 schools, then they're good. Washington, Utah, Oregon, and Stanford. And I think that's very, very plausible. I mean, you have 3 great football brands in Washington, Oregon, and Utah. And then you have a great academic brand in Stanford. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Yesterday, I mentioned a tweet about our favorite college football conspiracy theorist, MacGyver. And he said, this was on Sunday, on Selection Sunday, "I have one morsel to share. I've just been told Fox will play ball with the Big 12 for Parada for 2 all-sports editions. Fox wants Arizona and Colorado. And those would be 2 new footprints in 2 new states, Arizona and Colorado. Utah wouldn't provide that. So is this the Big 12 doesn't want Utah? Or is this the Big 10 wants Utah and the Big 12 isn't going to get Utah because the Big 10 wants them?" I don't know. But from what I'm hearing, Utah is actually more valuable when it comes to academics than Oregon. I did not know that. Even after the forward tweet by Mark Harlan, Utah athletic director, Dennis Dodd is still tweeting. And he said, sources, the Big 12 continues to speak weekly to expansion candidates. So the Big 12 is continuing to talk. And this was after the tweet by the Utah athletic director. And this was an interesting take by Pac-12 Sports on Prime. Keep in mind, this is a Pac-12 fan, not a Big 12 fan. Local ABC affiliates are running stories about UW, Washington, UO, Oregon, and the Four Corners schools accepting membership into the Big 12. SportsCenter's headline story is about the death of the Pac-12. Nat Geo, National Geographic, on Disney Plus announced an upcoming docuseries on Oregon's transition to the Big 12. Not the Big 10, the Big 12. So this would back up the narrative of Utah and Washington going to the Big 10 and not Oregon and Washington going to the Big 10. Yes, by the way, this will be a Get It Gang video. If you don't know what the Get It Gang is, it's basically a name that I came up with for a group of people that leave video ideas in the comment section of my videos. So if you think that you have a good video idea, leave it in the comment section of my videos, and I just might use it on my next video. So the first one is from Lee Barton. He says, GBD, interesting news rumors about Fox Sports expressing willingness to spend pro rata for AZ, Arizona, and CU, Colorado. I suspect they, Fox, would ante up for the other 2 other Four Corner schools, but who knows? CU, AZ, nothing more. I would be surprised. Rather, I suspect the final move will be CU, AZ State, and UU, Utah, possibly Wazoo and OSU, Oregon State, as well, to the Big 12. However, if only CU and AZ, those are 2 strong additions, though I would like to see UU for the Holy War and recent success, 2 Rose Bowls. What do y'all think? I agree with that, but it isn't a must get. Because remember, it was said it may only take 1 of the Four Corner schools to bolt from the Pac-12 to get the other 3 to follow, Big 12 sources say. But even if the other 3 don't follow, and you just get 3 out of the Four Corners, that's still a good chunk. And you could also get Washington State and Oregon State. You cannot forget about those 2 brands. So it isn't, oh man, if we don't get Utah, the Big 12's in trouble. As long as you get Arizona and Colorado, maybe Arizona State comes as well, then you can try to get Washington State, Oregon State, and I think they would be willing to jump from a sinking ship onto the Big 12 and make more money. Then you're all good. So maybe the Big 10 is interested in Utah and Washington, and that's why that tweet was sent out by the Utah athletic director. That still doesn't hurt the Big 12 all that much. Would the Big 12 prefer to bring in Utah with Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado? Absolutely they would. But it isn't detrimental if they don't get Utah. Next Get a Game video idea is from Jose Bergera. He says, I think Arizona should stop seeing what other people think, and if they want to make the move to the Big 12, they should do it. What anybody say, I think he meant, who cares what anybody say or says, because it's the Arizona program that's going to profit. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And Freeman Reed said this, hey, Golden Blue Dude, those are the two teams I would take also, Colorado and Arizona. If Utah and Arizona State isn't ready, fine. I would stop at those two teams and wait and see what happens with the ACC. With those two teams, they would be great additions to the conference. Just my thoughts. 100% agree. I really, really like that. In other words, what he's saying, if those other schools don't come, that's fine. You can get the two schools, Arizona and Colorado, and then wait to see what happens with the ACC. And you know me, as a West Virginia fan, I absolutely want the Big 12 to pick off the ACC if they do end up falling apart. And remember, the Florida Athletic Director, the Clemson Athletic Director, the Miami Hurricanes Athletic Director, and the North Carolina Athletic Director have all said they want unequal revenue share. So the ball is rolling as far as the detriment or the demise of the ACC starting to take into effect. It's still the early stages, but it's got to start somewhere. CarlosKnuckles says this. It may be Utah and Washington, Utah academically than Oregon. Yes, he's talking about to the Big Ten. That's what I'm saying right now. CarlosKnuckles also said this. I told a few people that Washington is wanted by the Big Ten first. Oregon is a maybe second. Again, I agree with that. Laren Beasley says, if I were the Big Ten, I would grab Washington, Oregon, and Utah ASAP. And I would throw Stanford in there as well. And finally, Doyle Murphy says this. Blue and gold dude. I'm actually going to blue dude, but I understand. When are you going to address the elephant no one is talking about? Who, if the Pac-12 is no more, is going to play the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl? Those teams from the Pac who go, Big Ten can't play themselves. Would it be the Mountain West? Or should the Big 12 line themselves up to play in the granddaddy of them all? I understand what you're saying, but I think the Rose Bowl is kind of a side effect. The Pac-12 is not looking good right now. And we've seen the transition of the Rose Bowl. Yes, the majority of the games are still Big 10 versus Pac-12, but they've also been included in the rotation of the playoffs. And they got out of that January 1st date. The playoff committee said, hey, we need to get you to not play on January 1st. That way we can keep you in the rotation of the playoffs. And the Rose Bowl agreed. Maybe they knew something that the rest of us didn't know at that moment. So a lot of traditions are already going by the wayside. That would just be another tradition that would have to be figured out. So yes, maybe it could be the Big 12 versus the Big 10 in the Rose Bowl. But don't forget about playoff expansion. So these are going to be second and third place teams playing each other if the Rose Bowl isn't a playoff game. And if it's a playoff game, then it's not going to be guaranteed that the Pac-12 is going to play the Big 10 anyways. So no offense, but I'm not really worried about the Rose Bowl. That will get figured out. But I do understand what you're saying. So I absolutely do think that the Big 10 could be going after Utah. That could be the reason why the Utah Athletic Director tweeted what he said. Utah does have better academics than Oregon, and the Big Ten does favor the academics. However, Oregon may not get left out if they go with 4 teams. Maybe it is Washington, Utah, Oregon, and Stanford. Because remember what the Pac-12 Sports on Prime said. Nat Geo, National Geographic on Disney Plus announced an upcoming docuseries on Oregon's transition to the Big 12. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's probably not true, but still, it's interesting. The thought of possibly Oregon going to the Big 12, not to the Big 10. And maybe it's Washington and Utah to the Big 10. And Oregon is actually stuck with the 3/4 of the 4 corners. Actually, that would be 3/4 of the 3/4 of the 4 corners because New Mexico's not included on that, coming to the Big 12 instead. So I would really like to see what Oregon fans would have to say if Oregon isn't being considered to the Big 10. Instead, they could be headed to the Big 12. I suspect Oregon fans would not be happy about that. But on the bright side, you could be coming in with your rival Oregon State to the Big 12, and that would lock in that rivalry. I don't know. James Crapia tweeted this. Incoming Oregon President John Carl Schultz on if he has a preference for UO's Oregon's conference affiliation. He said, and I quote, I cannot answer that question right now. I am a hardcore Oregon Duck, but very much want to see what's in the best interest. So if Oregon was going to stay in the Pac-12, wouldn't he just say we're staying in the Pac-12? But if Oregon's about to make a move, that's the response you would expect. So I would think Oregon is going to move, but the biggest question is, are they going to go to the Big 10 or are they going to go to the Big 12? Does the Big 10 want Washington and Utah and not Washington and Oregon? Or do they want all 4 of those teams, Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Stanford? Remember, the Big 10 still wants Notre Dame, and if you bring in Stanford, then you have a bunch of rivals of Notre Dame in the Big 10. They already grabbed USC last year. This year, they could grab Stanford with the other 3 teams. A bunch of possibilities still out there. But what I'm definitely hearing is that Fox is preferring to get Colorado and Arizona first. Now, whether that means they try to get Utah Utah and Arizona State in the second round. That remains to be seen, but they want Colorado and Arizona first. I want to read one last tweet from MacGyver that kind of ties all this together, and he said this: I don't really have a source close to that program, but I can just reiterate what I tweeted a couple of weeks ago. Utah isn't a high priority and is very low on the Big 12 radar. If you think about everything, that actually makes sense. So it seems like Colorado is definitely the highest priority for the Big 12, and Arizona is right up there with them. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number one, do you think the Big 12 only targets Colorado and Arizona in the first round of this conference realignment wave for the Big 12? Number two, do you think the Big 10 is actually interested in Washington and Utah, not Washington and Oregon? Or do you think they're going after all four of them, Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Stanford? And number three, if the Big 10 isn't interested in Oregon and they do want to bring in Washington and Utah, do you think Oregon actually ends up joining the Big 12? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.